type of diet is probably a good idea. Then you have hypoallergenic kind of diets. Those are, if we did that food sensitivity testing, we have a lot of kids that need to cycle through that food sensitivity elimination diet. And the best way I can say you on that elimination, if you've done IgG testing, you remove that food, if you can, if there's a very short list, for a period of either 3 months to 6 months, depending on how severe that food sensitivity was and how many symptoms you have from it. If there are just too many, sometimes I have parents that have a child that there is nothing but red on that list. There's nothing but level 3 food sensitivities. You can't just tell them to eliminate it all because they have to eat. Sometimes we put them on a medical food, and that gives their body a break. And then we just pick the top 5 things that are pro-inflammatory to remove. That's going to be your dairy, your soy, your eggs, your wheat, your nuts, corn. Those are probably the top things that I would eliminate from somebody's diet who had just too many to eliminate. So depending on some guidance with some food sensitivity testing would determine whether to what extent we'd have to eliminate some of those foods. There's a low carb Atkins type of diet. It's great for those people who have diabetes, who have high blood pressure. It's basically whole unprocessed foods with a very low glycemic index, less than 20% saturated fat. That's a great little diet for those people who have high blood pressure or high cholesterol, because it really works. It's basically sticking with lean meats, and maybe the low carb paleo might be a little bit of what we'd call that type of diet. So I know these slides are pretty dense because I wanted to have a lot of information that I could put on the slides on my website, so forgive me if there's a whole lot of words on these, but I did it on purpose. So the next several slides are all about how we should not eat wheat, and it sort of builds up to the whole reason behind why we're all fat and we're all sick and we all just don't feel good and we don't have energy. So wheat is very low in health promoting phytonutrients. Most of the wheat that we eat today is genetically modified. We have said there's so many studies that you can just go search on PubMed that say that wheat is involved in causing obesity and causing celiac disease and causing diabetes, a whole list of chronic disorders that people have. Wheat can also trigger some very odd symptoms that might be misdiagnosed as other problems. You just don't feel good, you have these weird little sensations, and you go to the regular doctor and they don't know what to do with you, and then they just say that you have chronic fatigue syndrome or you have restless leg syndrome or something, but truly you had something related to the food you were eating. You just couldn't put your finger on it, and the doctor that you're going to really just isn't thinking out of the box like that. So wheat can also cause circulating immune complexes that even in healthy people can cause all the itises, the vasculitises, the nephritis, the dermatitis, the arthritis. Basically, it's all caused by inflammation. Wheat also is involved in fermentation in the gut, like I talked about, the overgrowth in the small bowel, contributes to irritable bowel syndrome, fibromyalgia, imbalanced good and bad bacteria. And then some very odd things that can happen and even I see this in a lot of the kids with autism and such, is that the wheat itself can produce these gluteomorphins, which are these protein polypeptides that cross the blood-brain barrier, and it's sort of like this morphine-like substance. So when you eat that donut, and you eat that big bagel, and then you just go, that is sort of the endorphins and the morphine-like substances that are produced in the brain. And so it's actually sort of an addictive drug, because then you feel like you have to crave more carbs and crave more carbs. And, even the kids that I see, I think, what's in their diet every day? There's not a single fruit or vegetable, but they just crave carbs. And then they're going crazy and they're going bonkers all through the house, and they have terrible behavioral problems. It's because they are addicted to that sugar, they're addicted to that, to the gluten, and they're producing these substances in their brain that then they're craving, even more. So the modern wheat contains a super starch called amylopectin A that is basically how you get that big fluffy pastry or that big fluffy Cinnabon, you know, sort of sweet roll. The wheat that is created today is genetically designed to do that. In the research that I was doing for this presentation, there's the wheat of yesteryear, you know, from the Bible, that einkorn heirloom wheat, our daily bread and all that, you know, that's not consumed anymore. What we have now is this dwarf, what they call Franken wheat, which is a completely genetically modified product that has been manipulated by hybridization, creating these really short, squatty sort of plants that are high-yielding plants. And I was floored to see that the chromosomes in it are double what normal wheat of yesteryear was. And so there's 28 versus 24 chromosomes in the wheat that we're consuming now that our body doesn't know what to do with. Not only that, you know, this Norman Borlaug in 1970, he actually got the Nobel Prize for designing or engineering this promise, you know, this wheat that was supposed to feed, you know, all the starving people, you know, throughout the world, because it was a high-yielding wheat. Instead, what has it done? It has contributed to chronic disease and inflammation. And the reason behind that is that this super wheat, the super gluten, is very inflammatory. It's very sticky, you know, gluten's kind of sticky. The chromosomes in there are actually, there are more chromosomes in there, but they are also the chromosomes that promote celiac disease. So those that were in the einkorn wheat had small number of gluten proteins, and they were less likely to trigger celiac disease and inflammation, whereas the new one is now pro-inflammatory and has a large number of those gluten proteins that are actually creating the inflammation and creating the celiac disease. Because you wonder, why do we have so much celiac disease now? You know, why are these adults being diagnosed with celiac disease now? It used to be a very rare thing where it was a failure to thrive kid or a big bloated, you know, failure to thrive, you know, kid that comes in and you're like, oh, you must have celiac. You know, it was things like that that were very rare back then. This is the reason behind it. Gluten can trigger a full-blown inflammation leading to autoimmune disease, such as celiac, or it can trigger this low-grade inflammation, this gluten sensitivity, which is more of the innate immune system versus the, you know, antibody autoimmune reaction to food. So both cause symptoms that are almost identical. It's just, do you have a diagnosis of celiac or not? And so the doctor's going to say, well, you don't have celiac. And I don't do the IgG testing, so you don't have anything except, you know, chronic fatigue or something, you know, or depression. You must have depression, and, you know, they'll put you on some medication. So wheat contains also this non-gluten glycoprotein called lectin, which is a combination of a sugar and a protein called this wheat germ agglutinin, WG, wheat germ agglutinin. And this was very interesting in all this research I was doing, because people who have leaky gut and inflammation and you know, you're just saying, okay, well, I'm going to go off wheat. What I found is that not only do whole grains have this lectin, but also peanuts, kidney beans, soybeans, they're all high in lectins. Not only that, you have your cow's milk, nightshade vegetables like potatoes and tomatoes. They're pretty high in lectin too. So there are a lot of people that get off the wheat, or they think that if they're not eating white flour, they're doing good. But the whole grain is one of the highest in these lectins that are pro-inflammatory too. They're not causing the celiac disease. They're not IgG or, you know, mediated or autoimmune, but they're certainly causing a lot of inflammation.